Hey Mike, how are you? Good to see you.
Good. How are you, Aaron?
Great, thanks. Good day so far?
Yeah, no, good day. Good day as always. How about yourself?
Yeah, going great, thanks. Happy to be talking with you.
Yeah, same.
So I've got some questions and things to run through. Because I know you're at a recruiting practice, Pedersen and Partners, and it spans across 50 countries. And that's a pretty big playing field. So you're on the recruiting side when you look for candidates, that wide a stretch, how do you find them?
Yeah, I mean it's impressive how much of a spread we have. I think it's up to like 54 countries now. I mean, generally, rarely are our projects across that wide of a space, I would say. Usually we'll go across a couple of countries or a couple of regions. So it's not like every search is the entire world, which helps. But even when we do, it's very select and skill set based on what we're looking for. So I think that the biggest factor in how wide your search is, how many people you're talking to, is really just the skill set more than geography or anything else, because that really determines how many people there are out there that can do what you're looking for, I guess.
Well, and part of your role is you're actively searching for candidates, right? You're maybe making the first move at times.
I'd say making the first move all the time. I mean,
Uh,
I would say that's the big difference in, what, depending on what kind of recruiting you do, the type of people you work with. When you get into executive recruiting and really the higher levels, it's really headhunting more than it is recruiting. I mean, you're going in and finding people that kind of match what that is, that maybe haven't even thought about it. They're very happy at their jobs.
yeah.
And you kind of just say, hey, well, what would interest you? Or, would this kind of tick any boxes for you? And I think that's a difference too in depending on the type of recruiting, because there's all sorts of of other boxes that you can fit into that you might be after different types of people.
So, and as a headhunter, what in your due diligence and your searches and all that, what's more appealing as a potential candidate that's open and available to work, or one that is actively sitting in a position that's similar to one that you're hiring for?
I don't think it's, I mean, more desirable. I think that if they're open, there's a better chance of them answering the phone or and speaking to me, which is more than half the battle. But in terms of appeal to myself or to a client that I'm working with, I think if you're looking, it depends on the cases around why you're looking and what's going on, and that goes just if you're not looking too, because pulling somebody out of a job, there's a lot of fighting there too. They're very happy there. They might have a really good system or what have you. So in both cases, again, it goes back to the motivators of these people and what their true motivation is for making a move or looking for something new, or kind of looking for a change.
Well, yeah, with that wider net, including those that have a position, a career position, and they're happy, and I mean that really exponentially widens that pool of candidates. It's probably maybe bigger than it's ever been. Um, what do you think the benefits are of having such a wide reach for any given position? And then maybe what are some of the complications or drawbacks about that?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, that's kind of across the board, not even internationally, but whatever kind of recruiting you're doing, especially post, COVID, so many different jobs being remote now. It's no hiring used to be such a regional practice, where everybody has to be in the office no matter what they're doing, and or on location or on site or what all the time or what have you. Um, and now that's changed, and it's going both ways. I think it helps very skilled people find new and great opportunities. Um, it so it kind of widens everybody's possibilities. And as far as hurting people, I think that you've seen certain. I think geographically we'll see it where you don't have to live in certain places to get jobs, and just living somewhere doesn't open you up to the kind of opportunities that it used to. Where it used to be, somebody needs to be there, we'll hire anybody, or there's just not as many people there. I think that has changed, and we've seen that people are now moving out of cities, and that'll probably ebb and flow like it has historically, but just the people movement has changed. And that used to be a big thing on why people change jobs. Hey, I have a long commute, or hey, office is closing and now they're relocating here and I don't want to relocate, or
Yeah.
now those kind of factors aren't there, and they are for other people. Hey, I used to have to commute, I didn't, so I moved, and now I'm looking for a job that's different or what have you.
Yeah, with that shift around the geographic limitation, I mean, a job used to be, you could find out about a job from a sign on a door, right? Back in the day.
Yeah, yeah, right.
And then it became a newspaper posting in the local newspaper, and then maybe a trade publication or a magazine or things like that. But now that recruiting is, such a mature profession of its own and a discipline. You're dealing with postings that are never posted, really, right?
Yeah, and I would say things that people don't realize is they're probably a specialized recruiter for just about every job out there. And you might not think that your job is specialized enough no matter what you do, but there's probably somebody that just recruits for the type of work that you do somewhere out there. Like it's so different than it used to be, I think, for a variety of different reasons. But it is, yeah, getting a job is very different than it was, 10, 15, 20. Forget about 30, 35 years ago. It's completely different now.
Thinking about, I mean, some of the differences also are pretty recent, past couple of year type of differences too, right? With the balance between the remote and an office,
Yeah, and
freeing up the geographic limitation there too.
yeah, I mean, there's that. There's also, even before that, we were just getting into where the packages and fringe benefits came into play more for people. Like, it's not just about the salary. Healthcare is a huge thing for people now, and vacation time, and there are companies that give, also childcare and gym memberships and all this stuff. And I think that has, changed what people look for in jobs, on top of, what you mentioned. I mean, locations used to be a huge thing. It's not so much anymore.
Mhm.
Um, but there's so many different things now that go into what people think about when they're looking.
Well, and some of those benefits that you mentioned, the childcare, on-site gyms or cafeteria, the elevated uh, chef experience or whatever those things
Yeah,
are,
right. Yeah.
some companies, but that's all physical presence. You have to be there for those type. Is that a way of re-enticing candidates to say, look, we're come be on site again?
Yeah, I think if now that, it's funny because pre-pandemic, I think a lot of places were just, like I said, we're just pushing into kind of offering those services. Post-pandemic, since some of them had them in place and now have additional room, because even if they had those offices, they're generally not using the same amount of space just because of the nature of how people work now.
Mhm.
Um, I think that is the draw of working locally and having something, is those kind of pull benefits to bring people into an office and make it worthwhile for them to, kind of work in those shared spaces. And obviously it depends on what you do. There are some jobs that are still not remote and don't have any flexibility, and possibly never will. But there are so many more that have now shifted to that space, that it's just open up all sorts of avenues for people to continue to work,
Mhm.
when something happens in their life, or just I think it's changed a lot of the dynamics of the hiring structure. And one of the other big things that played too for candidates and people looking for jobs, and companies having to deal with it, is the openness in salaries and compensation and laws that have passed here in California and in New York and other parts of the country, where you have to be much more open about salaries, and there's a lot more transparency there, and people are much more open about it in the workforce now than they were, say, 10 years ago. And I think that has changed the dynamic too, where candidates now go into job hunts or thinking about jobs with much more clear demands in their heads, and clear numbers in their heads than they used to. And I think that's a difference, where you just talk to somebody, oh, I don't know, I don't really think about that, or what have you, and now they're very set. No, this is the number I need. I think people are much more conscious of kind of what their target numbers are when they're looking for new opportunities, and what would actually make it worthwhile for them. And I think we just pay more attention to that bottom line now than kind of what used to just be a paycheck, and not that people didn't think about the money, but I think it's more cued in to what you're looking to earn in real potential, real dollars.
And is it based on an understanding and a research and market value of what your worth is on that position? Or is it saying, look, if you want me to meet the demands of what you're asking, here's what I'm, here's my number.
Yeah. Well, it's both. I mean, you're going to get paid what what somebody offers you. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just like anything else. Your value is very much what somebody is convinced that it is. But you do see differences in people that have stayed at one company for extended period of times where they're just getting the normal kind of year over year raises to people that have moved once or twice and gotten those larger jumps. Because, I say to people all the time, if you're not looking, which again, most of the people I talk to are not actively out there looking, they don't have a real reason to leave their job, then financially it really needs to be worthwhile for you to move and start somewhere new and start somewhere fresh and do all this stuff. So, this is the chance. Like, again, going back to kind of what would it take? What would really do it for you? When I talk to people, I always talk about, what's the number that you walk into your boss's office right now and just quit? Like, what is that number? Because that's the one that I really want to target because, then if you like, the opportunity that you get presented or the company that you meet or what have you, then all of that is kind of taken out of the equation because, everybody kind of is clear on what it would take. And I think that you see people take those jumps and, a lot of people now will talk to people that, again, because they're open with it. I had an ex-boss and, I talked to him about what he made when he left. And that gave me an idea that, people just kind of go out into their own little networks and kind of think about that, I think, more and talk about it more.
Mm. Yeah, that's interesting. And I know you work a lot with senior leadership, right?
Yeah.
And when we went to a forced remote environment, I think as a workforce, we proved ourselves capable in ways that maybe
Yeah.
weren't, it didn't seem as obvious in a, in-person environment that maybe positions at different levels had self-sufficiency um, and could come through without direct management oversight.
Mhm.
Have you seen an impact on, let's say, middle management because of that? Or
Um,
maybe a shift in those roles?
I don't think so. I mean, obviously, I think that it has somewhat shifted because you need to change your style and how you manage. There are people that went from having their team, having, press and flesh and having hands on those bodies in the office and being able to kind of be there right there. And then maybe, now it's something like this where they're managing remotely or what have you. And I think it's just changed the dynamic insofar as much that just the style of management has to change. You haven't seen vast restructures where, hey, we're going to get rid of this kind of level because it's not really applicable anymore or stuff like that. I haven't seen any of that where it would really make a larger impact.
Mhm.
But I mean, I was in a semi-remote job and then went fully remote and saw this change and shift that you had to do in interpersonal skills and everything. And listen, the video helps. I mean, it does make it's different than a phone and all that, but there is still a difference between video and having somebody in the room and being right there next to them and just the delays and that's been the biggest shift is a re-emphasis on softer skills and management styles and stuff like that where it really does make a bigger impact now that there's employees and hierarchies and all of that.
Yeah, it was an adaptation for sure, and I think a lot of companies are still kind of figuring out what the level setting is after that, and what the future looks like.
Yeah, and you've seen that kind of ebb and flow. There were companies that really expanded during COVID and then really constricted in the kind of year or so now post COVID. And I think that's where everybody's trying to kind of find their footing and where we really need people in the headcount and all that stuff. So
Mhm.
it's been a really strange job market, obviously, the last 5 years or so. But it was crazy for a decade before that, and before that we had another crisis where it was up topsy turvy. So it's
Right.
always riding tide, just trying to figure out the next one.
Well, I presume it does create unique opportunities or openings for candidates if they know where to look or what to do to be prepared. And if someone is looking to broaden their job search on the candidate side, going back to the regional or the local versus widening the broadening the thinking. A candidate may not be thinking as large as they could be if they're looking, regionally, like who's headquartered in my area within driving distance. They could be looking nationally, or if they're looking
Right.
nationally, they could be looking international. So I'm wondering, how can candidates become aware of the types of opportunities, even the ones that are never posted or never made public? How do they even become aware of those or be in contention for them?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's certainly tough, and depending on what you do, like you said, some of those are never even advertised, and you never know about them until it's too late. I would say, describing somebody that, I mean, that's somebody that's actively kind of looking or interested. I mean, internationally, it's all about researching companies and kind of seeing who's in the market in those places. Generally, most places have smaller talent pools than we do here in the US. So if you know that a company is you want to move to a place, you want to work for a company, it's pretty kind of easy to squirrel in and do some research about them and kind of reach out to someone, you know, in that company, or find somebody that can introduce you. Um, but I think that's a lot of it. I mean, you can connect with a recruiter that's in that area. Again, most recruiters nowadays, I think all recruiters, there's no charge to you. It's not like we're taking any money out of your pockets. And I've had people use me for years as a resource where, hey, I have a friend that's looking, could you help them? Can you talk to them? I have, my nephew's graduating from school, just interested in the job market. Can you talk to them for 10 minutes? It pays for recruiters to talk to anyone because we're just doing market research on our own. I mean, it works both ways. So, there should always be people out there that you could reach out to and talk to. But that's really a lot of it because, there's all the job boards that you can go out and look, but then you're, one of 10,000 other applicants. And I think that's another huge change. The ease at which you can apply for jobs nowadays
Yeah.
is a blessing and a curse. You get lost in the shuffle and you don't really, nobody might even see your resume because you might be, one of 10,000 people that apply for a job, which is insane. So, making yourself stand out is much more about personal connections and trying to, use your own network or introduce yourself to people that work at that company, or find different ways to interact with different people.
So, and in doing those outreaches and trying and working to build those genuine connections, what are the politics like if there's a company that works with a partner recruiting or a headhunting type of agency? Where are the efforts best spent, in terms of building those genuine connections, or getting a friend on the inside, or a champion? Is it within the company that brings it to the recruiter saying we found someone to take a look at? Is it on the recruiting side, headhunting side, to say, you put in a good word for me? How where's where's the dynamic? How does that all come into play?
And I think as a candidate, you could play both roles at the same time. You could talk to recruiters and try to do your own inroads at a company. There's no problem with that. There's nothing, untoward about that at all. I would say that if you start making headway, you should tell whatever recruiter that you're working with that, hey, I kind of know these people here and they're doing this. But, a company, depending on, again, it very much depends on your level and kind of what you do. But especially at a high level, if they're interested in you and they're working with a recruiter, they're just going to tell the recruiter to talk to them,
Yeah,
and deal with it. But I would say it always helps to have an inside man, no matter what. You
yeah.
never know how that can help you now or down the road, or whatever. At the end of the day, it's just another connection that can help you make more connections. So I would say, listen, I am a recruiter, but try to do it on your own first because it's more genuine. And you, again, if you're in, it's one thing if you're switching industries, but if you're in the industry that you're still looking to continue to, you should know somebody through some sort of level at that target space, or somebody that knows someone there or used to work there or whatever. And that's really going to cultivate you, because then it shows a genuine interest from them too, from the company, that you're motivated on your own to kind of join them and be a part of whatever they're doing.
Well, and I like to ask what doesn't work. If a candidate has qualifications, motivated, fired up, wants to start yesterday. Maybe what doesn't work, what can you tell is just the wrong approach, wrong way about it.
I mean, it's a lot about feel. I mean, you know, people always say company culture. You'd be surprised how many times, and especially doing international recruiting, how often it is like this person just did not, you know, vibe with us. Like we just didn't feel like they would fit in here. You know, we work differently. Whether that's, hey, you know, we're used to working in a huge company and we're a startup and it's just a whole different kind of feel. Or, hey, you know, they are much more of an East Coast personality and we're in Southern California and that kind of just isn't our vibe. And, you know, don't think they would gel with the rest of the team right or whatever. That I think is a huge kind of, you know, thing. I mean, it doesn't matter what it is, how you interact with people, it still determines how people are going to work with you, whether it's remote or you know, and in terms of, you know, a faux pas going forward or selling yourself into a client, whatever, I think it's just, again, that's about feel. I mean, you could reach out to somebody and they could knock it back to you, and you could reach out again and they could knock it back to you, and you could reach out again. Then they'd be thrilled that you kept reaching out. And, you know, hey, I'm so glad you called. I've been meaning to, I keep forgetting. Or like you'd be like, why are you calling me? I don't want to, you know, clearly I'm ignoring you, leave me alone. And it's so much, you know, is so hit or miss and timing. I mean, you can never really tell. Again, I tell people all the time that every time you're getting hired or you're interviewing or whatever, it's always people. Like it's constantly people. We all change. We all have good days and bad days. You know, when you some people have a bad interview because they got in a car accident on the way to the interview, and that's just not their true self, and not who I spoke with, and not who you spoke with. But when they spoke to Greg, that's how they were, and you know,
Yeah.
Greg doesn't even understand why we're talking now, and you know, and I always try to tell people that you know, there's only so much you can do, so just you know, try to be yourself and hope for the best, and just you know, always try to have a positive attitude where, hey, I you know, don't mean any malice. If somebody snaps at you about reaching out, hey, I apologize, can you point me in the right direction? Like I'm just trying to, this is my goal, like
Yeah.
how can I get there, you know?
And do you give that, do you give feedback? Do you give positive or constructive feedback if someone asks for it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I try to give feedback all the time. You know, it very much depends on what I get from the client. Sometimes I can interpret, you know, hey, I don't think they liked you because of A, B, and C and D. I try to do that when I'm talking to somebody about a job. Hey, you have, you know, D, E, and F, but A and B you're weak in, and you know they might have a problem with that. And you know, I just want to be upfront with you because this is what I see.
Yeah.
And you know, I do that for as a recruiter, you do that because you might be wrong, and they can say, "Oh, well, I actually do have a lot of A. Did I mention this?" And you're like, "Oh, you didn't." Like, let's go through that. And then you can,
Yeah.
you know. Um, but it also goes to like, listen, here's where you might be weak, but here's where you're strong. So if we interview and you talk to them, you're also prepared for that and kind of know where they think you're weak and where you might be strong. And I think it's just about being open and honest. When you're dealing with a recruiter as a candidate, you have to believe, you know, that it's a partnership, and you have to kind of just be honest, and you have to understand that if I tell you something that you might not want to hear,
Yeah.
that it's me being honest. You know, it comes up a lot when you talk about salary and compensation and stuff like that. Like, listen, they're not. You might feel like you're worth that much, but they're not going to pay that much. You know, other companies will, but this company might not. You know, so I'm just being honest with you. Here's where they can go, or here's what I think, and you know, it comes up constantly, but there has to be a level of trust that, listen, I'm going to tell you these things because, you know, I'm trying to help you out here and you need to tell me so that I can best represent you to everyone else. You know?
Yeah. Well, and it benefits a potential candidate to listen to those types of things, right?
Yeah. And you listen, and that's a big thing. Like, again, it's double market research. You know, it goes both ways. Every recruiter you talk to will tell you something that you might not have known. Every person, candidate, business partner I talk to, I get knowledge too.
Mhm.
So, you know, there might be things that you don't want to hear, and there might be things that you do want to hear, but you got to take them both because that's the only way you're going to learn and you know, figure stuff out. And just prepare yourself for the next time. Because again, if we talk, I hope that it works out and we can do business together, or we can, you know, I find you an opportunity, what have you, but it might not, and it might not the next time, and it might not ever. But you know, you never know until you start talking and have open conversations and really be honest with people.
Right. Right. Yeah. It's doing them a favor. Um,
Yeah.
any wisdom or, you know, any wisdom you're putting your time into say, look, here's what I'm seeing. Here's a truth that I've uncovered, or any of those things. It's, it's maybe saving them from themselves before they go on to the next situation or come back.
Yeah, right. And even, you talked about feedback. I mean, that's a big thing from interviews. Like, hey,
Yeah,
listen, this is what they didn't like. You came in a little hot, or hey, they thought that you were very like low energy. And there's all sorts of different things that, listen, they've passed on you. But if you have another interview, this is what I would, how I would act accordingly, or do what have you.
yeah, that was great. Let's going back to the international, or just the fact that you're dealing with candidates, and geography it's more free than it was years ago. As a generalization, what are some of the roles that use companies based elsewhere are actively hiring for here?
I mean, I think, you know, across industries, and just because of how markets are, I mean, anything in sales is locally based.
Mhm.
And that could be also, I mean, people forget that there are sales in every industry, and it's not just like, brick and mortar, but actual people out there kind of running all sorts of things. But that is a huge one, especially for international companies, because sales and operations, because you need local people who understand how things work and how business works and the attitudes and everything that goes into that, so that's always two huge ones, are sales and operations. Manufacturing, you can ship a product from overseas and it gets here and it's the same product. That doesn't change. But your sales pitch, if it's a non-English speaking country, you can't just translate your sales pitch to English and send it to somebody and assume that's going to work. That's not kind of how that stuff works.
Mm,
And I think it's anything where you need, that person to person is going to be a huge, again, local kind of thing. And it all depends on the type of company. I mean, if you have a company that actually has manufacturing here or operations here, that's a whole different ballgame than you are that maybe just needs an American presence, or, whatever country it is. Same thing with American companies going overseas, where,
right.
hey, we need a local person there who speaks the language. We can't send, you know, uh, Joe from Brooklyn to over here. It's just not going to vibe right. The business doesn't feel good. So yeah,
Yeah,
I think it's very,
yeah.
diverse. I mean, every company is different what they need, but I would say, sales and operations are probably the two key ones where you just need people on the ground that are local, understand the business, understand the ins and outs more smoothly than some other things.
Mhm. Well, and I hate to lump international into one,
Yeah, right.
category.
Yeah.
It's
Rest of world. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. If there's two companies down the street from each other that do the same thing, they're gonna be different from one another, right? So I multiply that out. But if there's if we can do that for a moment, are there characteristics from if there's companies based elsewhere that are looking at a US based, let's say, leadership team, or the sales team, or team members in general? Are there universal characteristics in prospective candidates that are highly sought after, or is there something specific about US based, leaders, or workforce or team members that stand out?
I think when I'm looking for someone, say just a general international search, what have you, when you look at someone, there are things that make people stand out. I mean, I'll give my own example because it fits what I'm going to say anyway. So I was approached by Pedersen and Partners. They're a global search firm. Part of the reason why I was approached is because I've lived in Australia, I've lived in South Korea, I've lived in a couple different places across the U.S. I travel a lot. You see, when you see a profile like that, you're like, all right, this person has dealt with other areas, other cultures, lived other places, what have you. People that either have lived overseas, speak multiple languages already. That's somebody where you're like, all right, this person, if they don't know how to work in this environment, they're adaptable, it seems like, or they've done something differently. If you looked at that profile versus someone that has lived in the same state their whole life, went to that state's university, got a job at the big company in that area, has been there for 15 years. If I'm looking for in the same search at these two people, the internet, the other person's just going to seem like it's more open to them and more out there. So I think if you're that type of personality or you have that type of background, that's already kind of appealing to people that are looking, and that's the biggest thing. I think that again, because it comes down to personality, especially in that aspect. I mean, it's all about kind of the person that you are and how you adapt and how you can change companies or change regions or interpret what another country is saying to you and kind of filter it through and put it out towards your locale. I mean, there's a lot of that goes through when you're looking for international candidates that are working either for a company overseas locally or vice versa. I think
Yeah.
that comes into a lot of it.
And how do cultural nuances come into play? Where maybe there's leaders that are come across confident here, but maybe aggressive to another culture. How does that how does that dynamic work?
I would say that that's a really good example. One that I've run into quite a bit, where searching for, say, American-based candidates for other cultures, whether that be European or Asia Pacific based, is that they're very kind of, Americans are boisterous and we talk ourselves up and we're very kind of push forward, and other cultures like, oh well, I didn't like the way that he came off. Like I felt like that was weird. Well, that's how business is done here, though. That's why you're hiring this kind of person. Um, it comes into play. I mean, you interact with people and just have to kind of, again, learn that what I did with my client country X, I have to do differently with my client country Y. I have to do different with my client country W. Now it's just learning and making mistakes and asking openly and honestly, hey, how would you like this done? What would you prefer? Um, but that is a huge aspect, is just realizing that things will be different in other areas and that's okay. And you just need to adapt to it. And if you make a mistake, that's okay too. Because again, as long as you're open and honest and not malice in what you're doing, then everything can kind of be overcome and fixed. And
Have you had that happen where you say, no, 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 it's a cultural nuance. There's it's just they're a good, good person or the right person. It's just we have to align on what they were trying to say versus how their approach was perceived. Does it ever
yeah, absolutely.
that way? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That happens. And you go both ways. You go to in this case, the client and say, hey, listen,
Yeah.
that's, you're seen as a minus, but that's a positive. Here's why, that this is the type of person you want. And all right, we'll talk to him about it, but this is it. And then you go to the candidate, whatever, and say, hey, listen,
Sure.
nothing wrong, but next time just ratchet it back a little bit, just calm it down, be aware, be a little more self-aware. And that's not only that, but like, I'm a rambler. A lot of people ramble when they interview. You ask them a question, they go off on tangents, and they go, and that is a huge criticism I've gotten throughout my recruiting career about candidates all the time. I asked him a simple question, he went on for 15 minutes, and he answered it, but he went on for 15 minutes. And a lot of people just talk when they're nervous, and you just you go through it and say, hey, listen, be more direct. They ask you direct questions, give direct answers, and if they want you to elaborate, they'll ask you for more. Okay, like just hold a little bit back. But a lot of people do that. It's a big thing. It's just they a lot of people prep now for interviews and over prep, and they have all this information there. They want to get it out. They want to show that they know all this stuff, and sometimes it just comes off as a little bit too much.
Well, sure. And sometimes I've found the best, in all types of situations, the best interviews are conversational. Um, and you build a rapport, you have you make a mutual connection or something that's real, and then you build off of that. But when it does feel like a hot seat for not just an hour, but now that you can go through 7, 8 layers of interviews in some situations, it ratchets up the tension, or it can, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And yeah, now, I mean, people go through a lot of interviews now. I would
Yeah.
say that's for sure. There's a lot of layers to how corporations do their interview processes.
Right. And expecting someone to be their best self at every moment throughout that on both sides, right? It's a tough ask.
Yeah, and that's what I always say to people. Like, hey, listen, it probably wasn't you. They probably just had a rough day. Like, let me kind of go around and talk to them and see what's going on and if we might be able to fix something else.
Yeah. Or and sometimes it could be a culture thing, or like we were saying, a cultural, or they maybe from the candidate's perspective, they didn't smile once.
Right.
They didn't give any feedback, and then you say they love you, and it's like, what?
Yeah, right. Yeah, well, that I mean that happens a lot where it's tough to kind of read the other person's reaction to you,
Yeah,
and then you get off you're like I have no idea what happened. Who knows if they're gonna like me? And then it's, oh, they loved you, and that's just how they are.
right. And it can happen the other way around, where you feel like you're building this, you're about to sign the papers, and then you say, look, it wasn't a fit, or whatever. It could happen.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, Going back to just thinking about on the candidate side, especially if there's an international focus, or maybe a mindset, or maybe they're going to take us up on this advice of looking more broadening, and they're actively, if candidates on the hunt for a job, what should their day look like, and how should they split their time up?
I mean, listen, I would say if you have a job, you're currently employed, that should be your main focus. If not, then be doing research, reaching out to people all the time. I mean, but you can nowadays. The first thing I would do is set up job alerts. If you're starting to look, just set up a simple job alert. You can go on LinkedIn, you can go on Indeed, you can go on whatever local one you have in your country. Set up your own job alert just because you never know. Something might pop up, what have you. If you're interested in speaking with a recruiter, I would say find a recruiter. They're easy to find. You can go on LinkedIn and search for them as well, and just search keywords that you would look for in an industry and recruiter, and someone will pop up. And there you can do your research on good firms and bad firms and what have you. But if you're really motivated, again, it's no charge to you, and you can just pick their brain. Hey, this is what I'm thinking. What are your thoughts? What types of jobs would I be looking for? What is the average salary in there? You can be kind of open and just ask them questions, and a good one will give you the answers, and a bad one won't take a call to begin with.
Yeah.
And then if you've done all that, I think it goes back to the companies. Be active, join a local group there if possible. Maybe you moved and you're looking for a job, or again, if you're looking to, I mean, the internet is at your fingertips. Find local connections, find whatever, however you reach out into the world, reach out in that way towards this job or this company or this region as well, because that's going to be your truest self. That's going to where you're going to be able to make the best connections, and whatever that way that you do is, that's what I would do in your free time, because the other stuff, a lot of it you can automate, you can talk to people, you can do, but those real connections, I mean, that's how you're going to find things that's going to really make the impacts for you, I think.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you like to share in the success of candidates and placements and things like that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, there's still, I mean, I come across names all the time. Oh, I remember that. I ran into somebody at a barbecue like 2 months ago, and they just got a job at a company. And I'm like, oh, I know the head of that whole department. I placed him like 12 years ago at that company, and
Yeah.
he's still there. Like, he's, oh yeah, that's my new boss. Like, yeah, I know him. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
So yeah, you definitely. I mean, it's interesting. You see people's career progress, and I've done a lot of my work in healthcare and pharmaceuticals, and the impacts that you see people make and the companies that you work with it's great. And that's one of the reasons why I like that industry a lot.
Is that what you enjoy most about what you do?
I mean, I would say the part of the job I like most is just talking to people. I mean,
Yeah.
you talk to the most interesting people that have been through the most strange experiences, or hey, I live there too. I've run into people that, I'm from a very small town in New York originally, and people that know where that is always blow my mind, and
Mhm.
or people that we've crossed paths, or all sorts of different things. But I just enjoy meeting and talking with new people, and um, being able to work in different areas and different regions and interacting with people in all those different spots. I mean, that's really what I like about the job. And then the other stuff, when you place someone that is, that somebody that takes medication that company developed, or that has something that they're working on, it makes it all the more sweeter. And I've been lucky to have that happen a couple of times through my career.
Very nice. Yeah. Great. Before we go, you want to give a plug to Guys for Good?
Yeah. So, as you know, we met through San Diego Guys for Good. Just a good group that we've started here in San Diego, kind of pooled charity is the way I usually describe it. Just people that want to make an impact, give back in their community. In this case, San Diego. Um, get together, pool together some money, and give it to some worthwhile charities. We've already given a couple cycles out to some people that do work with foster kids, and then I think legal services for the underprivileged. So, and it's been great, and we're already meeting other people and interacting, out in the world. And this goes back to what I said. However you interact with the world, this is how you get out there and meet people and kind of push your goals out. So I think it's a great group, and I hope that it continues to grow, and we're able to make a bigger impact here in San Diego as the years progress.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I hope so too. Thank you, Mike. This is great.
Yeah, thank you. I really appreciate your time.
Yeah, really nice talking with you.